The last week or so, I've been making adjustments to my testing. And I really like the route that it's actually going. And I figured I'd explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and the little nuances that might help other people. Most testing that I've always seen has either been rope, cardboard, but I really was not satisfied with toughness testing. Now, any knife that I get, I generally like to put about 4 or 5 edges on there before I start really putting it through testing protocols, parameters. And I think there's a big disconnect between cut testing and real world usage. In the last video or two, I was mentioning about using ice blocks to mimic, not exactly pounding into hard material like concrete, metal, or hardwoods, but the occasional strike that people would have. What I've determined and what I'm doing now is I'm actually running 3 tests to actually evaluate a particular heat treat on a specific steel. The reason why I'm doing that is because you often hear this steel is better, this steel is tough, this steel is that. I want to come up with a test that I can compare everything and all attributes that I believe are relevant to an actual owner/user. The first test that I want to do is a longevity style testing. Now, I separate knife steels into 3 separate categories. And there's obviously carryover, but this is my testing. This is what I'm doing. Anybody can do whatever they want to. The first is entry-level steels. Steels that are at a budget price point. They're entry-level for anybody getting into the hobby, and they are the most affordable and in a lot of ways the most enjoyable. Spyderco being my favorite brand, HCR 13 MOV on their Tenacious line seems to be their entry-level steel for a lot of models, basically almost all of them. Obviously, they have the Polestar and some other Chinese models that come in BD1N, which I really enjoy. However, HCR 13 MOV has been around for a while, and I really haven't seen testing how I'm doing it on, well, any steel, so I'm basically going to cover what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Now, when I think of longevity testing, I think of a user that's actually using a sharp maker to maintain the edge and doing touch-ups sporadically throughout the week to get more mileage out of their knife blade. You can go 2 routes. You can do stropping, or you could use ceramic sharp maker stones as a touch-up. Me personally, on entry-level steels, I'm using the bench stone. This is the medium rod, or the medium stone, which mimics the brown rod on the sharp maker. And what I'm doing is I'm doing alternating passes. I do 2, well, technically 4 passes on the corners, and then I do 4 on the flats every 45 cuts. 45 cuts mimicking a day of honest usage of what somebody would actually put their knife through under ideal conditions. Mind you, I'm cutting sandpaper in the air. I'm not bumping into anything. Most cut testing is under ideal conditions. So this is data point 1. Now my goal is to actually see how many days of 45 cuts with touch-ups on a brown ceramic sharpening stone / sharp maker rod, and see how many days of 45 cuts the knife will actually continue cutting through with my index card method. 8CR, AUS8, D2, a lot of entry-level steels, it fits into that category. Now the next level that comes to mind is also more of the mid-tier steels, like this Cruwear that I'm actually testing right now. I'm also lumping in MagnaCut, S35VN, even the Mule and AEBL, and eventually some Rex 45. I really want to use that under a ceramic sharpening stone progression. What I decided was to do a 1K Pride ceramic water stone, and I'm also setting a 3000, this is a 3000 grit Pride, okay, before I take it to the brown Spyderco ceramic stone. Cliff Stamp regulates the ceramic stone, this brown one, at I believe 12.5 microns. And I'm going to take that word over anybody else. Now, the point of longevity testing is to actually see how much the knife is going to cut under ideal conditions, under what real people would actually use their knives day to day for. Most cut testing is start to finish, point A to point B, but I feel like if you start implementing some touch-ups in there, you're never going to be able to set parameters that's going to cover every user, but if you start implementing that style of testing, I feel that there really isn't that style of testing that's out in existence. Generally, with me and my normal everyday carry blades, I usually like to burn through the first couple of edges before I start doing touch-ups, whether it's a ceramic stone or a leather strop. I feel that's a privilege I need to earn through usage, and most of the time the steel itself is gaining performance every sharpening session, and I'm trying to actually hit the plateau or the max amount of performance before I start doing that. The mid-tier steels like S35VN, S45VN, Cruwear, I'm still using the ceramic stones. The reason being is because I feel once you start implementing diamond in there, you really need to start looking at the super steels that absolutely require the investment of diamond abrasives. Now, I decided to actually use MagnaCut under the ceramic. I decided to use the AEBL under the ceramic. And I even have M4. And I'll probably use Rex 45 with the ceramic. However, even steels like this BD1N on the Polestar, in regular use, I found diamond to actually give me much better performance. So this is going to be lower tier on the diamond style of testing. Now, the reason why you buy super steels, in my opinion, is you're really not looking for toughness. You're looking for more wear resistance. Your daily workload requires a steel that holds up better because your usage is higher. Mid-tier steels like S45, S35, they can kind of go both ways. So there's carryover either way, but for testing purposes, I have to draw a line in the sand, and this is where I'm currently drawing the line in the sand for my own testing. After we get the longevity style of testing numbers, in which case I'm using 45 for the entry level and mid-tier steels. When you start going into super steels, I have a higher requirement, and I haven't got to testing it yet, but I think 65 cuts to mimic a day of usage is more applicable towards owners of super steels that have a need for more wear resistance. The lower tier steels have more toughness generally involved with the alloys and the heat treats themselves. There's only a couple companies that are really working with production super steels. I'm going to try not using any customs with this style of testing and have all the steels accessible for most users. Spyderco offers a lot of sprint runs, exclusives, so it's kind of hard to, if I have a custom that's one of a kind, at least with sprint runs and exclusives, there's accessibility for a lot of owners who are willing to actually buy the steels themselves. The second test that I'm actually implementing that I really seem to enjoy is to mimic more real-world usage as opposed to having everything completely controlled. In this test, I'm not doing touch-ups. What I'm doing is I'm implementing impacts on an ice block. Now, the testing that I'm doing, I have a bread loaf pan that I throw 3 bottles full of water and I stick it in the door of my freezer and I allow it to freeze for 24 hours. It slides out of the loaf pan, and what I do is I actually do strikes on it in the course of a 45 cut day. So this is the test. I'm actually running Cruwear currently. So what I would do is I would do 18 cuts on the sanding paper. And then I take that ice block and I would do strikes. I would do 9 of them. Mind you, this is to mimic moderate usage, not somebody who's banging on a hard material all the time. To get a more realistic value of cut testing and how it applies to more real-world scenarios. I would do 18 cuts on the sandpaper, 9 wax on the ice, and then I would do another 18 cuts to mimic users that are cutting soft materials, but they're actually bumping in occasional hard stuff every now and then. More real-world applications, because I feel there's a disconnect between controlled cut testing and real-world usage. If you start twisting in the cuts, I feel there's no quantifiable number that you could actually give how much lateral force you're actually putting on the knife. And most users don't have enough edges on their knife to actually start making tests that have, well, even data that's actually reputable. And instead of doing touch-ups, I'm trying to see how many days of 45 cuts it could actually survive with the combination of cutting sandpaper and the impacts on the ice. That style of testing, I usually have the ice block out for 30 minutes, and then I just say that's the end of the test for that day. Takes about 24 hours to actually freeze that block of ice. So that test alone may take 2 to 3 days to actually complete itself. So we have 2 data points: longevity testing with a 3000 grit edge with touch-ups on the brown Sharpmaker, brown benchstone. And then we have the combination of cutting and chopping impacts to replicate more real-world usage. Whatever user or what kind of style applies to you, you could actually see where your knife is actually performing. You have a range of where everything is going. Now, if I'm doing longevity testing and I'm combining the both of cutting and impacts, I need to have something on the opposite side of the spectrum where it strictly just impacts itself. So I freeze the block, and at most, from what I've seen, is about 100 wax on the block, and then the ice is no longer incredible to continue testing. I'm chipping away at it, and guess what? Water, super cheap, freeze it up the next day. So a knife may take me 6-7 days to actually finish testing. However, I'm going to have 3 data points cutting under ideal conditions using ceramic and a touch-up. I'm going to have a combination of cutting and chopping to mimic more real-world life usage. And then I'm going to do strictly just impacts to cover 3 major points of what a knife steel or what a steel is actually performing. I feel with those 3 data points, it covers everything that I want, me personally, what I want a steel to actually do. Other people do corrosion testing. I just feel like just a little tube of chapstick every single day is going to prevent 99% of the rust issues out there. That's just me personally. There is a few hiccups when it comes to impacting the ice, and that's obviously blade shape. Now, something like this Yojimbo, instead of whacking like, like that, I can't think of the word, I'd have to do straight down impacts because the blade shape of the Warney, that's the only way. And when I'm doing that on the ice, I'm trying to actually cover as much of the edge as humanly possible as opposed to a tiny little staple. Ice is not the hardest material, but I think it's the most accessible for testing, in which case I'm a huge fan of that, so anybody could replicate my style of testing. I freehand all my edges, so if anybody wanted to do more controlled angles with their testing, like a 15 degree, even on a KME or an Edge Pro, they could obviously do that. I'm explaining my testing, why I'm doing it, what I'm doing it for, etc. Now, when we start getting into the super steel testing, I feel like demanding 45 cuts per day is lowballing. What I think we need to do for the super steels is, number one, we got to eliminate the ceramic touch-ups. And I'm using a leather strop with 4 micron stroppy stuff on there. And I'm still doing 4 passes per side, but instead of using a bench stone, I'm using a leather strop with 4 micron. I've seen people use 16 micron, and to me, I just would rather take a diafold at that point. I think anybody that buys a 16 micron is just a fool. That's my personal opinion. I think they're better off carrying a diafold, or they should be carrying an accessory or a sidekick blade with them in case their knife goes dull. They walked into the day unprepared, and if you're carrying around a 16 micron strap, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. That's just my own personal views. But if I'm using a super steel, I'm demanding more performance in a daily workload. That's the reason why I would buy a super steel. Not to impress other people, but maybe my workload requires more wear resistance given a day of usage. People create trends. They want to. That's up to them. But for testing, I feel that raising the bar to 65 cuts per day, because I want more wear resistance on my super steels. I'm not looking at toughness. I'm looking for more longevity in cutting in a daily use. So I would still use 9 strikes on the ice with the super steels, because I'm looking for wear resistance over toughness. So in a 45 cut day, 9 strikes is about 20% of the daily workload. With the Super Steel, it's about a little less than 14%. Mind you, you buy Super Steels for more wear resistance and not gaining toughness. That's the reason why you buy something like S90V, Maximate. The more toughness you get, great. But you really buy it for more edge retention purposes. And you need to have diamond abrasive, so there's an investment involved. I really enjoy both, and even just having the ability to try and experiment with different stones. And you could wear this down to an absolute nub and you'll be perfectly fine. I'm using a 3K edge for longevity testing, and I'm using what I believe Cliff Stamp says is about a 1500 grit stone for the touch-ups. That's what I'm doing. Now, when I'm doing longevity testing with the Super Steels, I'm going to be using my 1K super vitrified stone, and I'm using a 4 micron strop every 65 cuts to give me a number on what the Super Steels would actually do and how many days they would perform. I've already ran those tests on some steels. There's a few that I need to really double check, and I may need to rerun them again. I don't care. Every day I'm trying to put out about 45 minutes worth of testing, so it's accumulation over time, and try to do a little test every single day and let the numbers just add up little by little by little by little. I like to categorize my steels on blade length, blade steel, and then just have some comparable results. Now, if anybody is actually interested in the testing that I've done, I've tested these three, and right now I'm currently testing MagnaCut, Cruwear, and this AEBL. In testing longevity, I got 5 days of usage on the Chris Reeve and S45VN. I speculate this might be wrongly labeled as S35, but the box, the paperwork, all indicates that it is S45VN. If I wanted to, I could probably burn through this blade in a whole year if I wanted to. The whole argument that this knife could last a lifetime, I think is bullshit. That's just my own opinion. Now, after 5 days, I decided to do the ice and sanding roll testing, and I got 3 days of usage on that. This Cutlery Shop HCR13 MOV Tenacious, longevity-wise, I got 7 days of usage. When I did combined ice block and sanding, or sanding roll testing with it, I got 5 days of usage. Now, when I did strictly hitting on the ice, the Sebenza got 60 wax, and the Tenacious got 80. If we use toughness in a ratio of overall wear resistance, the Sebenza actually wins and has more toughness to wear resistance as a ratio. I'm still looking at how to make a, what's the right word? To categorize how tough a steel actually is. Should I use the toughness in relationship to the how much it does in total? Or should I do a quantifiable rating system based on the survival to cut testing on data point 1 or data point 2? Or should it just be a competition who survives the most amount of impact strikes on the ice itself? The ice block, 100 wax seems to be as much as I can go on the ice block itself before I discard it and I come back to it the next day. I don't mind if a test takes a couple of days to complete, as long as there's integrity in the testing media themselves. Remember, ice melts, so I like to stick to a 30-minute window at most. That way the material that I'm using is rather credible, as opposed to having it out for like an hour and a half and it's melted and getting some off-the-wall number. The S35VN Tenacious. Now, I really appreciate this FRN texture on this S35VN as a work knife. Someone like me who has worked with a lot of oils, greases, and a lot of slippery materials on my gloves and my hand, I appreciate the texture that this Tenacious actually offers. I feel somewhat of a hypocrite when it comes to the FRN textured models, because I'm really looking for texture and I'm looking for overall balance in hand. A lot of people like the Manix Lightweight. I personally don't like it because I think it offsets the whole balance of the knife itself. However, I like this texture over this G10 when it comes to a work knife. So I can't really say which one I like better. I guess it really depends on the model itself. Now, this S35VN, when I did longevity testing, I got 11 days worth of usage on it. The Tenacious itself at 3000 grit still managed to have a lot more bite at the edge, which I personally prefer for a work knife versus something like this Sebenza. When I did impacts with cut testing, I got 8 days of usage. When I did the impacts on the ice block, I got 90 wax before it did not pass. So technically this S35VN held up the highest. However, if we look at how much wear resistance to impacts and we start doing percentages, this is about 18%. This is about 26%. So right now, I'm not 100% sure of how I can actually give proper ratings towards toughness testing at this current time. But this is the testing that I'm actually doing. Now, when it comes to stone maintenance, especially with these ceramic-based stones, I'm using a silicon carbide axe puck and barkeeper's friend to actually keep the stones clean. I mean, you could look at a lot of the metal swarf that's actually built up on the stones themselves, just because I actually use my stuff and I enjoy everything. There's still a couple of hiccups that I need to figure out in my testing. I think I've really dialed it in, like something like this Native Chief. I use a longer sanding roll because the cutting edge is longer, and something like the, or even like something like the Stelica right here, okay? The cutting edge is a little bit shorter, so I do have a measuring system where I actually make sure I'm actually using the proper size sanding roll. But this is the testing that I've done so far. Now, in my current testing that I'm actually doing, which is still ongoing, longevity testing, this mule in AEBL, I got 15 days of usage on it. This MagnaCut got 14, and this Cruwear, I believe it got 14 as well. I feel like my testing is unique. It's something that I haven't really seen, and it's something I'd like to actually explore. This in BD1N, in real world usage, I found that diamond seems to be the best stone to actually, or diamond progression was the best, gave me the best performance. So this BD1N Polestar, I really like this knife. That's obviously going to be in the diamond side of testing itself, but I figured I'd do what I thought was going to be a quick commentary, but this is the testing that I'm doing, and I hope these 3 data points actually provides a more clear and concise picture of what a steel can do overall as opposed to one specific test.